Choose every city in my tribe. Look behind. Booty dominate.
Man, this live is a little weird
Yeah.
vibes. It kicked you?
What? It did it with
TikTok
me
doesn't like you.
too. Come on, Zombie,
You know,
come back.
I just need to go get a spray tan. This is way too much work.
Oh yeah, send me your PO box or whatever you have so I can send you some sriracha.
Oh, thank you. You're so
Oh.
sweet.
You guys looked like you need someone to debate with, so I came in here.
Hey, come, we had a really, really great debate yesterday, so maybe we can keep it going.
Yeah, I'm just gonna get out my paper so I can take notes, so I can address all your points.
From yesterday, dude, I don't know if I can say that on live. I'm just gonna say it, but I was high, and we, I don't know what I was talking about. But let's see how we're doing today.
Okay. Because I'm sure people know me here. Should I go over my argument again?
Sure. That would be a good start.
Okay. All right. So, I already sorry. I just ran, so I know I believe that human life is valuable. And how I ground that is basically using perception, right? I believe our perceptions of reality are usually accurate, right? So when we see a pillowcase, it's usually a pillowcase. When we see a pencil, it's usually a pencil. When we see a book, it's usually a book, right? And I believe the more perceptions you have, the more likely something is to be true, if those perceptions line up, right? Since when we see a 2-year-old, we always say, oh, that 2-year-old has value, right? It evokes a big emotional response to us based on our perception of it, right? Since everybody is experiencing the same perception of this 2-year-old child, we can say with confidence that 2-year-old child is valuable to our society. So that's kind of how I ground how human life is valuable in our real world.
May
Right?
I ask you on your framework something? Is it also that we have this inherent value for the 2-year-old because it interacts with us as well?
Yeah,
to some degree.
We use that to evoke the emotional response.
Correct. I agree. I think that them having their own unique identity, or by displaying features that a 2-year-old has, for example, grabbing your hand, smiling, laughing, revokes this emotional response. So that kind of goes straight back to the personhood argument, though, Julian, you must see that coming, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so why is there value if it has absolute no interaction, doesn't have this place in its society, just like we would see a 2-year-old or even a newborn?
Right, so we have to first we say we don't discriminate between a 7-year-old and a 3-year-old, right?
Are we having a legal argument or a moral argument?
This is a moral argument. So when we're saying oh, this interaction is why we value X, right? We actually have to substantiate this interaction is what places the value on the fetus, right? So I'm using it basically to ground that perceptions give us a high emotion, which makes us value the human, right? But I don't necessarily believe that the value of the human changes throughout its developmental status, right? I believe it's the same, entity, so it has the same value through its, stages of life, right? So what you need to do is you need to tell me why the interaction we have is necessary for the value of the fetus.
Well, because the subjective value that would be subscribed by the pregnant person would definitely protect it. However, if there's absolutely no subjective value subscribed to the fetus, especially prior to 24 weeks, I don't see why we ought to value it then too, on a objective level. Because objectively we can say, yeah, it's not just the subjective thing that we happen to have for this 2-year-old. It's pretty objective that we value individuals and humanity, and what properties do they have to have in order for them to be valued.
Right. I can see your point that it is subjective valuation of the fetus in this case scenario. But let me give you a scenario in the real world, right? Let's say we have an interaction between, a mother and the child, right? And the mother gets close to the child, right, which makes her value the child more. And let's say we have another child who doesn't really have a family, right? We place the same value on both childs in each scenario, right? Because the interactions we have with people doesn't necessarily give them their value. That's why I don't
But
believe
see, Julian,
interaction is necessary for the value of humans.
So your argument is perception.
Yeah.
So how do I know someone is pregnant?
You perceive them as so, right?
Well, I mean, if they don't tell me, I would argue that I wouldn't know, and therefore my perception would be that it's just an individual person, and therefore the
Right.
fetus or embryo doesn't exist.
I'm confused where you're going, but we have medical technology to, detect whether somebody's pregnant or not. And pregnancy
Right,
tests
but
can
I'm just
also.
saying from an outside looking in, like that's why it's not like illegal for a bartender to serve a pregnant person because
Mm-hmm.
you don't have the responsibility to tell you can't always tell if someone is pregnant or not.
I guess you don't always know whether somebody's pregnant or not, right? And this gives us the reality, like, that our perceptions aren't always accurate, right? I said they're usually accurate. I don't believe the perception we have of fetuses currently is an accurate perception. I believe people are devaluing their, fetus. So, like, when I say perceptions are usually accurate, it's usually a universally experienced perception that I'm calling accurate. But yeah, our perceptions can obviously
be
deceive us.
compromised. Yeah, but then
That
you
is
would make
based
the
on an
argument
illusion.
that prior, like especially in the first trimester, it is like really hard to detect a pregnancy from the outside. Like a 2-year-old is there, it is
Mm-hmm.
objectively there. Like we can all see that 2-year-old or touch it, grasp it. Whereas a fetus or a zygote, an embryo at that stage, is hardly ever to detect.
And where
From
are you going with this?
Well, because
just like
essentially your argument is perception, and couldn't I just argue that, until a pregnant person is actually perceivably pregnant, I could argue that the perception that the person is there, it doesn't exist, and therefore that would give it less value.
No, because that would assume that perception is always accurate, and a mere illusion shows that perception isn't always accurate. Uh,
But
so
isn't that your
like
argument? Is
no,
perception?
my argument is grounding human life on the basis that we perceive humans on this planet as valuable, right? So like, why doesn't that extend out to like
I
the womb?
would argue that we don't.
yeah. And may I ask
We
you
don't
another
perceive.
question? Oh yeah, go ahead, Kinsey. Sorry.
No.
Why don't you believe we don't perceive like humans on this planet as valuable?
Slavery, the death penalty, war.
All right. So like in the case of slavery, right, we have to see what's happening here. Um, People didn't really see black people, at least in time of like American slavery, as necessarily human, right? So I don't think that negates my argument because like people have to see the person that they're killing as human, right? And for the death penalty, the people did the heinous crimes. I
I
don't
would
believe.
argue that I do see an embryo as human. It's just not human life I give moral consideration to. And
um
I don't think that like anyone during the point of like slavery would say that you know
It's not a human. Yeah.
POCs were not like of the human species.
Yeah. Also, Julian, like if you look at like an embryo at a certain stage, like you could definitely make the argument that the human features are not necessarily there, especially as a zygote. Like how would you be able to differentiate from like a human zygote or like even a dolphin zygote? All those things are then pretty arbitrary in my opinion.
of course scientists would be able to do it, but we know that its entity is a human, which is what's important to me. I also want to ask like Kenzie a question, right? What makes you like not value the fetus in the womb?
Because it doesn't have the characteristics that I would give moral consideration to.
And what are those?
Essentially a fully functioning brain.
Brain. Anything else?
Are you writing this down?
Just the
If
brain?
you would like the specifics, so my argument is that a new human life comes into being not when there is mere cellular life in a human embryo, but when the newly developing body, organs, and systems begin to function as a whole. Because I think that's symmetrical with the death of an existing human,
Okay, so
which, you know, go ahead.
let me clarify. It's like viability when it's able to survive without the mother's resources is when you consider it valuable.
Is when I would give it moral consideration.
Okay, moral. So like a big part of like this is like the consciousness of the fetus, right? Or no?
It's definitely one element.
Do you mind?
Consciousness, sentience, automaticity.
Do you mind if I
Homeostasis.
attack sentience and automaticity?
Sure.
So like, you know, someone who is in a state of like a coma, right? And they have a low like level of sentience and consciousness, right? If they weren't going to like gain or regain a higher form of like sentience and consciousness, we wouldn't extend moral consideration out to them, right? So I believe in normal society that we value humans based on their future potential for sentience and consciousness rather than their past potential for it.
I think that exists simultaneously, but we had this
I would
argument
say more
yesterday.
capacity than potential.
For capacity?
Correct. Capacity more than potential.
Are you talking about current capacity or future capacity?
Yes.
Which
Because
one?
I could
Current.
argue that someone in a coma does have the capacity, they just aren't awake.
But like,
And I would argue that a slave has current capacity, but a fetus does not. That's why your comparison, I would say, is very moot.
I didn't compare anything to slaves necessarily. I compared.
Well, you have
people
compared abortion to slavery.
No, I didn't. I said in this debate,
Yeah,
I
you
said
did.
that slaves weren't considered people, right? And so like, if somebody kills a slave, it doesn't necessarily mean they don't value human life, right? Because they didn't really consider those people human at that point, which was morally wrong. But I don't think it like makes my argument mute. However, like the thing I think I'm going to like say something about like Kenzie's argument, right? It's like if someone is in like a coma, right? We're seeing them in their current state as, you know, low conscious, low sentience, right? Of course they do have the ultimate capacity for it, but like that capacity is not, you know, guaranteed, right? The same way like the fetus's capacity isn't
Then
guaranteed.
why can they wake up if they don't have the capacity?
Why would they wake up if they don't have the capacity? Right?
Yeah.
So sometimes like, okay, let me bring a situation where there's like life support in like keeping the person in the coma alive. They currently do not actually have the capacity to sustain themselves without that life support. Similarly, the fetus doesn't have the capacity to sustain itself without the resources of the mother.
Right, but I would argue that the capacity of the person in the coma is not necessarily due to brain capacity. It can be due to other capacities like, you know, your heart, your lungs, other things that might be have an issue with. But with a fetus, it is brain development.
So can we assume that it's due to brain capacity?
Are you saying capacity or capacity?
Capacity.
What is capacity?
Capacity.
Capacity.
Okay.
There's no M, right?
Gotcha. Yeah.
Like, can you, like, honestly, that's just, you're making fun of
I'm
my
not being
speech and,
trivial
like,
here. No, I'm not making fun of it. I just wasn't sure what you were saying here. If this was something that I wasn't aware of.
It's really not funny, honestly.
I'm not laughing
I
at
do
it.
have
I'm
a
not making
speech
fun of it.
impediment, and, like, it's not funny, but whatever.
Sorry.
Go on. It's not bad. So, like, even if it's, like, due to these other factors, like you're claiming, right, there are certainly cases where it is due primarily to, like, other factors may contribute to it, but brain capacity is what we're studying here, and it's what we're interested in here. And it's the application of the brain capacity in a certain scenario, which we can apply to the scenario of the fetus, right? I don't really see
Right,
how
and
the
I would
other...
argue unless they are brain dead, they have the capacity.
I'm so fucking cute, bitch.